The position would be perfect stepping stone for your career. But after scrolling to the bottom of the ad, you see 2 to 4 years of relevant work experience required. Relevant experience? What does that mean? Relevant to what? This particular position, the industry is general. If you don't think you have it, should you even apply? Don't worry, it is not as bad as it sounds. Read on to find out the answer to these questions and more. Relevant experience is past work experience that is relevant to the job you are targeting in terms of the skills or knowledge required. Relevant experience is highly sought after by employers and often a requirement found on job postings, so it's important to highlight on your resume and cover letter. Relevant experience does not mean you need to have held the exact same job title or worked in the same exact industry. As long as you can show that you develop the skills that transfer to the new job, where or how you gain them is less important. Relevant work experience can come from almost anywhere: previous jobs, internships, volunteer working, freelance work, academic projects, programming projects, extracurricular activities, tutoring. Basically, recruiters want to find the perfect applicant, the one who will perform a job the best. The idea is that the candidate with the most relevant experience will be the most successful in the given role. Let's give a relevant work experience example. Imagine you are applying for a job as a customer service representative, a job title you have never held before. If you have previous experience working as a cashier in a grocery store, you likely developed verbal communication skills and problem-solving skills that would transfer over directly. That means even if the job required years of experience, you would likely qualify. Is relevant experience important for employers? Absolutely. According to one report, 65% of the employers prefer candidates that have relevant experience. Experience is the yardstick you will be measured by, so it's worth putting the time into learning how to write about work experience on a resume. The important thing is to highlight your relevant experience and employability skills on your resume so the HR manager sees your relevant experience front and center. But you might be shocked, or I will not say surprised, that why I am talking about the work experience, relevance of the work experience, while the topic is irrelevant. The work experience is irrelevant. So the reason is, in today's fast changing conditions, especially in COVID times, it was observed that more than work experience, one can perform better with their knowledge and soft skills taught in college. So basically, pre-COVID time or earlier, people were going with the work experience. But now we found during the COVID, even you might be having 30 years of work experience, but if you are not being able to handle the soft skills or the technology which is required, because everyone is working from home around the world, so then your that 30, 40 years experience will not work. The only thing will work, how to handle, how to operate the laptop, how to communicate online, because here you are not in front of your customer, your client. You are talking from the screen, and it's totally entire different game. Convincing somebody eye to eye contact and convincing online is a very, very different thing. So now the corporates have changed the strategy. Instead of asking them to write about their work experience, they want to know how tech savvy you are, knowledge you have, and how much time you have already spent or worked, even online or not, but you should know the technology and you can communicate properly. So they will see your skills. They will not see your experience. And that's why this topic is work experience irrelevant now? And to discuss this topic, we have a very elite, knowledgeable, those who are in the fields of marketing, or those who knows, those are the recruiters, and those who knows what is the changing trend and what is the position today in the job market. So I would like to invite my first panelist guest, and he's Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal is the former professor of marketing, innovation, and management, IIM Lucknow, XLRI Jamshedpur, and California State University, USA. He is president of Indo-Gulf Management Association. He is US Fulbright Fellow Boston, EFMD Fellow Paris, and British Council Fellow London. In 2019, he was ranked among the 251 most fabulous global education leaders. Welcome, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal on our show. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, wherever you search, you will find the relevance of work experience. Everybody talks about the work experience. But yes, the fact is today work experience is not giving, that weightage is not been given to work experience. The reason is the total concept of the business model is changed. And this COVID has shown that it is not only the work experience, it's the how you have a power to convince somebody, how you can operate online, the technology. So the changing scenario, although you, I must say you are such an experienced person, to ask you that work experience is irrelevant is also a very, very nasty thing to ask you. But because you are updating yourself, you are seeing from every side, you are interacting with the young generation. So definitely we would like to take your views on is work experience irrelevant now? Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, please. Please unmute.
Thank you and good morning to all of you. First of all, to Mr. Goel for giving such a very, very, I would say, illuminating commentary and giving us the kind of runway on which you would like to fly later on. And I would like to see other views also who are on this elite panel, as you rightly mentioned. Let me begin with a very, very personal story. And this personal story began 24 years ago when I had the privilege of retraining Air India. And Air India was retrained because skies were made open by the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and many private airlines came into on the horizon. I would use the word horizon here, on the sea. And when I was doing a series of interventions, the name of the intervention was World-Class Customer Experience. And our goal was to allow our Air India people or Indian Airlines at that time, both of them were separate. So Indian Airlines as well as Air India to experience as well as provide a similar experience to their customers. What exactly is world-class customer experience? So in one training program, since the cross-section of the people were in my training workshops in New Delhi, one person came up to me during the recess and he said, Professor Mohan, we all like you, that is very nice, but I am a little bit concerned that in this particular program, you are training us or retraining us along with the people who were not in any human form when I was in the uniform. Now, that was something most amazing I had ever heard in my life, which is what I called arrogance of experience. That where the work experience has made a person not only arrogant, but also has made that person blind to what changes are required, to what changes are happening and how the system is, and where we can even learn from what is in our organizational behavior and HR. And I'm sure Ms. Shagun will later on tell a little bit more what is called a reverse mentoring. That in reverse mentoring, we learn from youngsters. Even though we are experienced, we learn new skills, new thoughts, process, new ways of going ahead. So this was one little experience which showed to me that work experience, instead of being a facilitator, is becoming a stumbling block for learning. The second scenario is when we hear people from IITs, IIMs, and of course now we can also include Munjal University and university of that caliber in India, and also many other universities of that prestige, where the youngsters are receiving salaries on campus placement, which we had never even heard of in our life, which is almost making you star right from the beginning, and where the experience was not even asked for. What was their motivation to hire them? Probably their talent, probably their thinking process. So therefore, this was another thing that came to my mind, that not only this experience is becoming a stumbling block, but we are also suppressing the talent in the name of work experience. So this was the second situation I would like to highlight. So what I'm trying to say through all this is that there are advantages and disadvantages of work experience, and I am prepared to take a position where I would say that work experience is becoming less and less important, less and less relevant, because of the changing situations in the market, and because of better teaching and better educational environment in universities, at least in many universities, if not all universities. And definitely among the top universities, the work experience is being given in a variety of ways, which was not possible probably 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Let me explain to you what the changes are happening in the market. In the market, I would say that there is one term which is really dominating our entire industrial or economic world around us. And that word is LPG: liberalization, privatization, globalization. In liberalization, the people are allowed to do things without too much control, bureaucratic processes, bureaucratic paperwork. In liberalization, they are saying government license is not necessary. And as at one of the shows of ours, we had said that government doesn't solve the problem, government is the problem. So that particular government is the problem, takes care of it through liberalization. The same thing happens in the case of privatization, that where the government-owned organizations once are doing much better, they are unlocking wealth, they are unlocking the potential they have, and they are making many, many more people richer than they came into that particular organization, or they were looking for what is known as the lifetime employment guarantee. Now, all that particular thing is being now replaced by how quickly you can go from one position to another and create wealth for others, rather than just being as if that you are lifetime guaranteed employee. So therefore, this particular thing also made the work experience a little bit overrated, if not totally irrelevant, definitely overrated. And the third thing made it further, I would say, irrelevance of work experience, and that is the globalization, where you are dealing with unfamiliar situations, and unfamiliar situations do not necessarily require work experience. What they require is a thinking process, the way you are conceptualizing the process, the way you are conceptualizing the problem, rather than you are just doing what it was done yesterday. So it is not more of the same. It is totally different, or in many cases, significantly different from one situation where you started to the situation where you are going. So as a result, that work experience becomes to that extent, to me, a little bit irrelevant. And perhaps, just to provoke thoughts, I will say it has become irrelevant. Later on, this LPG was changed by the most major, I would say, emergence of this technology, IT. And this made entire thing so different that things that we were doing were no longer there. The jobs are not there. The jobs that we did are no longer there. So therefore, where is the point of work experience? So that was another factor which IT made, if it provided. And the last nail into the coffin of this work experience was perhaps driven by COVID, in which you very rightly mentioned that the organizations with a heart, organizations with a mind did better than the organizations with the past. Or People with the past were not as effective with people of today and people of perhaps, empathy and other things that they were able to do all those things. So given this scenario, I believe that work experience is either overrated or it is a very, very clear case of the law of diminishing marginal utility. In other words, more work experience than more dysfunctional or more unnecessary like that. Last thing I would like to say, and then I will hand it back to you, is that what is the use of work experience? Use of work experience is that I should supervise that person less. That person should be starting things as if that he is starting, like, or has been doing this work a lot more time. And then that we get what is known as the economic benefits of the experience curve, that you will be able to do it at much less time with less supervision, with the lower mistakes, because you have done that particular thing before. Unfortunately, today, we are looking for three kinds of skills: practical skills, logical skills, and lateral thinking skills. Now, lateral thinking skills is what is making us today a very, very pricey commodity. That pricey commodity tells us that if you can solve the problems of the situations which you had not seen before, then perhaps you are much better. Innovation is the name of the game. Creativity is another name of the game. Customer experience is perhaps another name of the game. Now, all these things are telling us that we need to move from the traditional reliance on work experience to the contemporary seeking and consciously seeking of cognitive thinking, which will include logical thinking, which will include also, as I said, lateral thinking, and definitely pragmatic thinking. The thinking which tells us what we can do, what we cannot. If these three things are there in a person, doesn't matter whether you have got what is known as work experience, and that too the way we know, and that is full time. These days, work experience is also being given by the colleges and by the universities, as I mentioned earlier, through live projects, through case studies. They are also giving them volunteering experience. They are also doing, in many ways, virtual experience. Today, many students are doing multiple internships because of the online opportunities that they have. So I'm trying to say is that today's person that we are seeing is already experienced, and in fact better experience than the work experience, the way you know it is coming. So this is my humble stance, and that is that to me work experience is overrated and is losing perhaps a shine. Thank you very much, Mr. Goel.
Work experience is overrated and losing its shine, says Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, for giving your views. And he has used some very, I must say, fancy words or good words, or some words which are unheard earlier. Like he says, arrogance experience. The experience, he says, the people have become arrogant who are having lots of experience. They think that they know each and everything what the new generation knows. He also mentioned about the reverse learning. He says that what is happening today is, if you want to see what is in the campus placement, the salary which has been offered by the organizations are phenomenal, which never been heard by anyone, even today, those who have lots of work experience. And it shows that the work experience has no place, because the campus placement means a fresher, those who has just even passed or who is going to pass the university or the college or the technical college, is getting that much salary because their latest technical know-how which or skills which the corporates wants to use. And he has also mentioned some words like that LPG. Now, we know LPG very well. Everybody knows LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. But he says, no, it is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Now, he has explained everything. Then he says about the thinking thing. He says practical, logical, liberal thinking. Now, again, these things which
Actually,
are...
it was Lateral
Lateral.
thinking.
Okay, sorry, lateral thinking. Now, when we are coming out with these types of things, latest, which a person having 30, 40 years of experience, 50 years of experience, never heard these types of things. For them, LPG means gas kachula at home. These types of things because of the new changes. And he says, whatsoever has happened today, are happening today, people are going for the new generation, new skills, and new knowledge. And I remember we had a program recently in which one of the panelists says that nowadays corporates wants a person, 10% is the preliminary knowledge, 40% is the work field knowledge, not the experience, and the 50% is the personality. So basically, the personality includes the soft skills and whatnot. So when we are going for all these things, definitely today, according to Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, the work experience is irrelevant. You might be having work experience, but it has become irrelevant because today a student is getting multi-internship from different universities at one time online. So he is getting that experience or knowledge, not experience, knowledge, but not the work experience. But his knowledge is far better nowadays in comparison to the work experience which we have. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, for opening our eyes. Tomorrow, when anybody will order LPG, I will say, okay, you are talking of something different, not this LPG. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he's Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar. Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar is the Dean of School of Management. He is the Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at BML Munjal University, Gurugram. Prior to joining BML Munjal University, Dr. Talwar was Assistant Dean with SP Jain School of Global Management. Up until 2013, he was an academic based in the United Kingdom, having worked in institutions such as London School of Economics and Henley Business School. Welcome, Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar on our show. Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal has mentioned. And he is very, very clear in his thoughts. Although he is having so much experience, now I will try to cut his profile, and I will just put one word, that he is a person who used word LPG. But what he says is, which makes lots of sense. He says earlier work experience is required because the job profile was almost same. If you are working in a workshop, you are changing the workshop, same types of skills. But now the job profile has changed. New thinking have come. Innovation marketing has come. So according to Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, he is very clear that work experience is totally irrelevant today. What are your views about is work experience irrelevant now? Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar, please.
Thank you very much, Goel, for inviting me today. I'm really happy to be with you and all the other guests this Saturday morning. I think Professor Agrawal has spoken very well on this whole idea of why he thinks experience possibly is irrelevant. From my perspective, I'll build up on his argument, possibly provide a slightly different twist to it. And why I would like to say that is, he did mention something called arrogance of experience. Let me just quickly, when I heard about this topic, the first thing that came to my mind, I don't know whether you've seen this movie, The Intern. This is a movie where you have Robert De Niro, and at the age of 70, he's obviously feeling, I believe he was a widower. He wanted to go back into work. He became a very senior intern at a very, very young online fashion website. I forget the name of the website, but he was somebody who kind of formed an unlikely friendship with the company's workaholic CEO. And the movie kind of, goes into this detail about how this person, with the immense experience he's had in life and at work, how he manages to be a kind of a connector, be a kind of a change agent, a facilitator for a lot of the young people who were there at the fashion website, having issues, problems, trying to work with each other. And in the process, something that very strikingly I remember about the movie was the tagline. This whole idea that experience never gets old. That was a tagline of the movie that said experience never gets old. So that's quite an interesting concept. And, I just wanted to highlight that because that'll give you an idea of my take on this particular topic, a very important topic. I'll first talk in general about experience, this whole idea that the world of work has obviously changed, right? So if I look at what Gartner suggests, the work has become less routine, right? Employees will work more in teams, many ad hoc teams in nature. Teams will come together, teams will separate, and many a times you will never meet these teams at all, these people. Somebody might be in Sao Paulo, somebody might be in Singapore, somebody might be in Ahmedabad, right? So it's quite possible you'll never meet in life, but actually you'll be working together and meeting certain goals. Work relationships will have a lot of what they call as weak links, where individuals who barely know each other, as I was mentioning, will have to work together. Informal groups of people outside control of a company will have a lot of impact on the success and failure of an organization. We're already seeing that. We look at social media groups, for that matter. They have a major influence. They're outsiders to a system. They're outsiders to a particular organization, but they definitely have an influence. Work processes will become obviously very, very informal. You'll require a light-handed approach, and this kind of gives us an idea of the kind of leadership styles that will become very, very prevalent as we go along. Does it mean that your previous experience will not matter? That's something where the jury's still out. We can always talk about the fact that, hey, a new leadership style requires starting from scratch. But is it so? I think that's something that I'm, obviously questioning. What you also have to remember, and we're seeing this already, is that higher qualification roles, right? Higher roles which have a lot of intellectual content, possibly, will be done remotely, right? Highly skilled people are the ones who are currently in this COVID environment working very much from their homes or locations such as Manali or wherever else, but not necessarily in their offices, right? So that also brings in a lot of insight into the kind of changes that are taking place. Once again, the changes in business models, right? So if you look at the technologies, if you look at this whole idea of the effect of exponential technologies, the launch of smart connected product services, the creation of highly optimized supply chains, business innovations, demand for resourceful planet and sustainability. Remember, a lot of focus has been recently in the last 10, 15 years on this whole idea of sustainability, not only from a financial perspective, but also from an ecological perspective. And the younger generation is driving a lot of this thought and action. New work arrangements, as I was mentioning earlier. Now, does that reduce the relevance of work experience? Possibly, it is a question of the kind of experience that we're talking about here. What you have to remember is in academia, as well as outside academia. So, in the real world, in the academic world, both these worlds, you will always have a constant dialogue. This whole dialogue, or this whole suggestion, in which what Professor Mohan Agarwal talked about, was this whole idea that arrogance of experience exists. So I think my question today is, I believe experience is relevant, but what is the kind of experience that is relevant matters a lot. I think we all kind of pride ourselves in saying that I have 25 years of experience, I have 30 years of experience, but I think we have to be true to our heart, and we have to be true to ourselves and to the world to kind of mention that, is this experience 1 year repeated 25 times, or it is 25 years of rich experience that also includes this whole idea of reskilling, upskilling, micro-credentialing, this whole idea of just-in-time learning. Because at the end of the day, we've reached a stage in life, and I was talking about this context, right? This whole idea that, we've reached a stage now wherein experience possibly may be relevant, but the nature of the experience matters a great deal, right? So we can't necessarily sit on our laurels or what we had gained possibly 10, 15, 20 years back on a host and a cluster of degrees that we might have managed to get. But it's also about this whole idea of a non-stop learning culture. Have we imbibed that? That becomes fundamentally important. The other aspect that I was talking about earlier was this idea of leading. What we have to remember here is that with the advent of IoT, with Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, blockchain, and all that, there's a lot of hustle happening within the educational environment as well, right? Whether you are talking about an MBA program, whether you're talking about a BTech program, many times this whole idea that the core is getting affected, right? This whole idea of what is the core is actually getting majorly affected. If you look at mechanical engineering for that matter, right? If you look at mechanical engineering, there's a bit of a dearth of core jobs, as they call it, right? At the same time, this whole idea that when I'm trying to prepare somebody for an MBA in finance, I'm trying to prepare somebody for an MBA in marketing or an MBA in whatever else, what you have to remember here is that we have to be able to involve ourselves in a very different approach to learning, right? A lot of the mundane, a lot of the replicable, a lot of the repeat orientated work will obviously go away because of automation, right? So how do you try and get these people to high level approaches, high level thinking, to high level critical decision making? That becomes paramount. Now, whether I talk about experience when I talk about newer graduates, whether I talk about experience when I talk about people who already established in life, have achieved, possibly are leading big teams, it's still essentially the same thing. There's this whole idea of higher level understanding, higher level of maneuverability, higher level of managing capabilities, right? One thing is for sure, that if our experience has been largely around this whole idea of ensuring certain levels of micromanagement, certain levels of, let's say, possibly leadership, wherein there's a lot of involvement, there's a lot of engagement, there's less delegation. Of course, when we deal with the newer generation, that kind of style will have to change, right? Because the newer generation expects a very different approach. New generation says, trust me. New generation says, give me the work, believe in me, and I'm sure I'll get it done. That automatically means that my whole orientation or my whole premise here is experience is important, because it's not just about the technicality of the experience. It's not just about the certain skills that you built up, but it's also about how do I optimize on it? How do I make a team work along with me? How do I ensure that everybody's coming together for a particular cause? How do I become essentially someone who's a bit of a servant leadership style oriented person? He says, look, I've got a good team. You may not have experience. You may not necessarily have worked in the industry for too long, but doesn't matter. I'll be the one who's first going to facilitate. Tell me, what do you need for me to be able to reach your goals or your vision or your plans or your dreams? A lot of all that actually requires experience. A lot of all that actually requires to be there, done that kind of an environment. So automatically, yes, the world's changed. Yes, there's exponential technologies. Yes, there's a lot of things, a lot of jobs that don't exist today. I'm sure even tomorrow there'll be a certain kind of jobs that will evaporate or go away. But does it reduce the relevance of dynamic, rich experience over a period of time? Right? There's a bit of a doubt in my mind as far as that is concerned. Of course, because we were also talking about this, how educational institutions are helping in the experience culture. If you look at it from an Indian perspective, from an Indian thought process, whether you move on from your class 12 into your undergraduate, into your postgraduate, it is usually a seamless exercise. It's usually an exercise wherein you tend to finish off your education, at least at the master's level, at one go. Possibly that has connections with the fact that parents or somebody in the family is actually paying for the education, which is a little different to, let's say, possibly what happens in the West, where people take a bit of a break after their undergraduation, for example, get the experience and then kind of fund themselves or at the next level. So that also means that from a socioeconomic perspective as well, from a whole ethos perspective as well, a lot of the Indian students, even at the postgraduate level, require rich level of experiential learning in the classroom, right? And of course, that involves live projects, that involves internship, that involves getting industry into the classrooms, working on centers of excellence. That becomes fundamentally very important. Why is that important? For various reasons. At the end of the day, the corporate is looking for people who are able to add economic value from day one. Okay, obviously you're looking at ensuring that your developmental costs, your training costs, to a certain extent are controlled. At the same time, what you also realize is that a lot of these costs should actually be borne by the educational institutions rather than by corporates in general. That means that even the educational institutions have to think very, very creatively about how they're able to work with the students, give them the kind of experience. It's not just about giving them an internship, right? What you also have to remember is it's about a continuity of connection with the industry that becomes fundamentally very important from day one of your journey within the university or higher education institution till the time you're graduating, or maybe even beyond. That connection has to be very, very active over a period. And of course, the various mechanisms that new age, dynamic, progressive higher education institutions are actually doing to be able to ensure that a lot of people who are coming out from educational institutions, even at master's levels, are rather, experienced in a way. Of course, what you have to remember is, yes, COVID has changed, a good deal of many things. And it has enabled multiple internships to happen at the same time. But what my feeling here is that this whole remote internship mechanism requires a lot of retraining even from the corporate side. Because look, at the end of the day, students are looking forward to offline experiences. They would like to go into the company. They would like to be there. They would like to network. They would like to experience how life might be there. And unfortunately, many of the students are not able to do that, right? And of course, by experience, a lot of the students have not necessarily been able to optimize a lot of the remote, internships as much. So that's something that may be required to be looked at. But fundamentally, my whole premise is, if we talk about experience in a generic manner, in a general manner, rest on our laurels, from the past, not necessarily develop ourselves, that essentially is on its way out, right? But if we've been able to ride the wave, if we've been able to ensure our experience is reinforced, is enriched, is dynamic, that is the kind of experience that will always remain relevant. Thank you, Mr. Goel.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar, for giving your views. And Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar has given a bit contrary view what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal gave. And he says the experience never goes old. And he has given the story of a very famous novel and the movie, The Intern. And he also mentioned, but depends on what kind of experience you have. Experience is relevant, but it should be a dynamic experience. So you can reskill your things. You should know what is happening in the market. You must reorient yourself. You must get those knowledge. But experience, according to him, is required. And he says lots of changes are there in the education field. But still, according to him, whatsoever we will say, the experience is required. The young generation says, trust us. But before trusting them, the corporates want to see whether they have some certain knowledge of that type of things which they are going to do. But experience, the person who is having experience can handle many situations which a young generation or without experience can handle. And according to him, although the COVID has changed scenario and some remote internships have come up, but remote internship is not still, according to me, still in infantry stage, because it requires lots of inputs to be given by the corporates. Otherwise, to it's a very different experience in online as an offline things which one had corporate expects. So according to him, this experience is relevant. Only thing is what kind of experience you have and how you are going to reskill yourself or enrich yourself now and then, so that you will be updating yourself with that time. And that's why, according to him, experience never goes old. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar, for giving your very, very forthright views and clear views that experience is required. So now we have two views. One says no and one says yes. Now we are going to for the third panelist, and it's like an Olympic 1-1 like that. So it's 1-1. The score is 1-1. Now we are going to our next panelist, and he is Mr. Anil C. Kapadia. Mr. Kapadia is the General Manager, Bukhtiar Insurance Agencies LLC UAE. He is a insurance professional and an insurance fellow with over 41 years of work experience across senior managerial roles across functions and across India, Saudi, UAE, and Sultanate of Oman. He has faith in human ingenuity and spirit. He believes that leadership lies in empowerment, knowledge sharing, training, and mentoring. Welcome, Mr. Anil Kapadia on our show. Mr. Anil Kapadia, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal as well as Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar has spoken, and both have given their views, very clear views. And now score is 1-1. Now we would like to know where you would like to give your views, this side, so that is work experience relevant now? Mr. Anil C. Kapadia, please.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be amongst a very distinguished panel with the kind of exposures each one of you have had. It will be very difficult for me to add anything of extra value. Having said that, I believe more on what Vishal has been talking. Experience definitely is relevant, but at the same time, it's only when you are able to connect, reinvent, and transfer these the values or the knowledge which you have gained yourself over to the next generation, that makes it very important. For me, all of you are people who are here doing a wonderful job because of the experience you carry. So for me, experience is not irrelevant, very, very relevant. Now the experience, as Mr. Talwar has mentioned very clearly, is irrelevant if I'm going to be doing the same thing for 40 years. I am more than having an academic background. I would speak more from my actual work experiences. Surprisingly, do we always need to recruit people with experience? Well, I was a direct recruit for United India Insurance Company straight from college. So how relevant is work experience to the job you are going to do? We went through a process where large organizations would bring in younger talent. When they are doing the evaluation, looking for is whether the gentleman has the aptitude, ability to absorb the knowledge and be flexible enough to handle multiple situations. So my first job was with FACT Cochin, 6 months across 34 different types of industries, functions. So it was a wonderful learning experience. In a period of 6 months, I suddenly become a direct officer commanding a large group of people. They now look up to me for leadership. So is experience relevant? Yes. What has happened is I have absorbed the experience of the people within that 6 months of induction and in-house training. So experience has been transferred. But for me, could I call it as my experience? No, I only worked with them for 6 months or been trained for 6 months. But after 6 months, when I come out, I'm having an experience of 3 to 4 years or 5 years, because of which I'm able to connect with the rest of the team. Very right. Now I have come over to the Middle East. unlike the public sector organizations of India, where they are having the resources and ability to build, nurture this new talent and bring them up into taking on new challenges. The private sector says, what do you do? How much have you worked here? How relevant it is for us? Because very correctly identified is you want to see what is the economic value you would bring, how fast you will be able to hit the ground running. Well, smaller organizations where the demand for economic value is important, you go for it. You will also see a lot of churn there. You have very large private sector organizations where they look for stickiness of the person. When they look for stickiness of the person, they look at the wider aspect. The relevance of experience there becomes how many different types of jobs you have done and how successfully have you done it. So when you are looking at it from a different point of view, very rightly, as Mr. Talwar has mentioned, it is 25 years of doing 25 different things successfully. So when I am going to be put into a middle of something new, how am I able to connect and how am I able to transfer my leadership? Experience for me ultimately transfers into your leadership. For me, again, as I mentioned, it was something very nice which I came across once. One of the gentlemen who was leading, he was a director in one of the companies in Sultanate of Oman, was reaching 60. I asked him, Vishal Bhai Sahib, what are you going to do now? He says, Anil, in the Sultanate of Oman, after 60, we retire. And having been in this position, I don't think I'll be doing anything more in India. My wish is to be a mentor to the younger generation. Dignity.com is what he said, I want to start. So what is he doing in dignity.com? Basically, again, experience is the one which is bringing on board, converting into a mentoring class, how should I put it, a mentoring package. Is transferring or is bringing in the ability of the younger generation to move away from just being academic into vocational, intuitive, and be able to convert their aptitude and abilities into something which he can deliver on a very short scale. My son, he did his graduation in the UK, and like Professor Talwar mentioned, as a father who's funding his education, I said, why don't you finish your post-graduation also? He said, thank you, Daddy. I don't want to do my post-graduation without having a relevant work experience. Once I have done my graduation, even during the graduation, he took a year's break, worked with IBM, picked up the local experience, then completed his final year, moved into the industry. And every time he will move to a different industry every 2 years and 3 years. I said, Abhishek, you have done something here. Now you're getting into a different job. Now you're getting into a different job. How do you find the job? What is it you talk in the interview? He says, Dad, I tell them, these are the new things which I have learned. And in this short period of time, and this is how I have delivered in this organization. I'm going to come to your organization where you are not necessarily doing the same things, but I have the ability, the aptitude to learn within first 15 days what your requirements are, tune my skill sets to those requirements and convert it into delivery. So what do I call that? I call that, for me, it is, to a large extent, he is imbibing the work experience of people around him, making it into a learning exercise and going ahead. Yes, work experience by itself, I was also going to take the example of Robert De Niro on the intern. Anne Hathaway is very correctly identified, huge workaholic. And I remember the scene where in the car, she says, take me to my daughter's school. And this is the Google app. And he says, sorry, I'm going to do it my way. She says, but you will be low. You have the relevance of experience coming in, where he's able to deliver in a simple manner. He has shown that experience combined with the new technology can be much better, or can be a bigger advantage I'm a small organization as Bukhatir Insurance Agencies, working as an agent for Oman Insurance Company, very small team. So I have all these things thrown at me. Anil, why are you always looking for experience? Why are you looking for qualifications? Why are you looking? I said, I look for a combination. When I look for somebody, I don't want, as a small organization, I cannot afford to hire people and train them over a long period of time. So I look for people who will come in with a bit of experience, with the correct relevant educational or vocational skills. Then we have an internal mentoring exercise. We build along with the person. What was surprising was, I was speaking to my manager and he started asking me questions and discussing with me. I said, Chief, I have just joined the organization. I only complete 1 year. And you're asking me things which, as if you know, I've been here with you for about 5 years. He was surprised. He said, my God, Anil, you have been able to respond to me. You have been able to deliver to me with the same expertise which I have of this 5-year man. How did you do it? I said, sir, by imbibing, by taking on board the value which the other experienced people bring on board. So experience is relevant. It is not the only thing. It is not 1 into 25. That is not irrelevant. I'm doing repetitive. I will never forget my cashier, my first posting in Surat, 40 years old. When I wanted him to move to another table, he cried. A grown-up man crying. I said, what happened? He says, sir, for 40 years, I've only issued receipts. Don't ask me to do anything else. I don't know how to do it. So did I have a 40-year-old experienced man? No, it's only 1 month into 12, into 40, beyond which he could not do. So that is irrelevant. At the same time, I had this young man who was a direct recruit managing 5 different tables. And he's managing 5 different tables by reading through, by picking on the work ethics, the work innovation from the history which is already there. And he has, for all practical purposes, it is his experience now. So how do I define experience? Do I define experience in number of years? No, for me, experience is the ability of a person to absorb the amount of wealth of knowledge that is around him. For me, that is experience. I think I've said quite a bit, but still, more of a novice compared to all you qualified gentlemen. But I can speak more out of my actual work experiences. No, for me, it's a combination of both. And I think Vishal has captured it brilliantly on that one. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anil C. Kapadia, for giving your views. And Mr. Kapadia, although he says that it's a combination, but his main emphasis was towards that experience matters. And he has given lots of his own examples about his son, how after the graduation he says, let me have some first-hand experience and then I will go for the masters. He has also mentioned how we can, the experienced person can successfully do many things. He also gave the example of the intern again, movie. So all these things, but he says that to absorb the knowledge is that real experience. So an experienced person can absorb the knowledge, and so his experience can play a very, very important role. So he is very, very clear. And he says that if you want to be a successful, experience and technology, you have to know how to use the technology. That you have to be like our earlier panelist, Professor Talwar, said the dynamic knowledge, dynamic experience. So it's a dynamic experience, what Mr. Kapadia, and he is giving all experiences. And he says the experience plays a very, very important role. Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Kapadia. So now our score is 2-1. I must say, I will not say 1.51, but it's a 2-1. Now, I will like to go to my next panelist. She is Miss Shagun Agrawal. Ms. Shagun Agrawal is the HR Business Partner, APEC, Asia Pacific Atlantic. What is that? Can you just say what is the full form of APEC?
It's Asia Pacific, Mr. Goel.
Asia Pacific.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So it's a Asia Pacific. She's a and Rode and Charles, German MNC at Singapore. She's an experienced strategic, word is again experienced. She is an experienced strategic HR leader with over 13 plus years of experience in business, partnering, talent management, and organizational development with global MNCs. She has worked across diverse industries such as telecommunications, fashion, and high-tech industry. She is a crucial conversations certified trainer by Vital Smarts USA, amongst a handful only to be certified in Asia. She is passionate about developing women leaders. Ms. Shagun has been part of the coveted women's mentoring program in Hong Kong and chapter lead in Singapore. She prides herself to be a thought partner to business and has proven experience in driving business results through innovative people strategies. I think 4 or 5 times in her profile, the experience word is there. Definitely, when I will ask Mr. Professor Agrawal that if this profile is, we will remove the experience word of any profile like we have with us, Ms. Shagun Agrawal, then her profile will be different. Anyways, now, Ms. Shagun Agrawal, you have heard Professor Mohanlal Agrawal, you have heard Professor Dr. Talwar, you have heard Mr. Anil Kapadia. They have given their views. Now, don't listen right now. We want your unbiased views. Don't think because you are Agrawal, Ms. Professor Agrawal is Agrawal, so if you want to give views towards him, or because you have, so we want your views. So is work experience irrelevant now? Ms. Shagun Agrawal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel, for giving me such a splendid opening filled with humor. And now I have a tough task to share my point of view without deciding which side I belong to. So allow me the next 10 minutes to share my thoughts around it. Now, we've got an interesting topic today. Has work experience become irrelevant? And I'll start off by answering the question by saying, yes, work experience in its current form has become irrelevant. And my emphasis here is on its current form. It has become irrelevant the way it is structured today. And what do I mean by it? I'll explain in the next few minutes. Now, let's take a look back. Disruption has been happening in our personal lives. Technology has been a key enabler on how we live our lives today. And pandemic has only accelerated that nature of disruption. So the way we eat, to online food delivery options, to the way we shop via e-commerce, to the way we even socialize. Today, family gatherings and meetings via Zoom are a household thing. When disruption of this massive nature is happening at our personal lives, our workplaces are not untouched by it. Workplace is evolving at a massive pace as well. With workplaces evolving like that, we have our nature of jobs being changed as well. And because of this change in nature of jobs, the definition of work experience is changing. And that goes back to my starting point. Work experience in its current form will become obsolete. And I could explain this in 3 ways. First, I think most of the esteemed panel here would have read the report from McKinsey, which was published 3 years back, saying that 50% of the jobs that we see today will become obsolete in future. And with pandemic, this number has only increased. So I would say when you have such non-traditional jobs entering the market, your work experience becomes irrelevant. So here I am citing by Professor Agrawal when it says work experience becomes irrelevant for such non-traditional jobs. And I'll give an example to back it up. I won't name the organization, but a leading fashion company recently posted a job called as an influencer marketing executive. Very fancy name, but if you just go back to basics, what it wanted was, it wanted to hire social media influencers to promote their brand. And when it came to qualifications, what they asked was that the candidate should have a very good social media profile with X number of influencers, should have a good network of influencers and stylists, and very good social media knowledge of YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and so on. And when it came to soft skills, they demanded problem solving, creativity, and communication as the skills to excel in this role. So for such kind of non-traditional roles like social media influencers, or even fashion appraisers, we are seeing a growing trend amongst our next generation opting for such roles. And for such roles, I would say work experience in today's form has become irrelevant. But then let's look at the other side of the coin. We will still have many jobs which will continue. Not every job will become obsolete. And when such jobs continue, the difference will be how we perform these jobs. They cannot be performed in their old ways. We will have to adopt to new ways of working. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example again. I'll take an example of my own organization. I represent a high-tech engineering firm which provides product and services to enterprises. It's a business-to-business company. Now, today, in the pre-pandemic world, I had my sales workforce reaching out to customers, selling these products and services in person and closing the deal. Now, when COVID happened, I had 100% of my sales workforce sitting at home, and they were given this uphill task of still meeting their sales targets while doing this virtually. So what did we as talent team do to help this vision become a reality? We knew that the first thing that we need to do is upskill our workforce, upskill them in digital skills. How can you conduct engaging webinars for your customers? How can you conduct engaging trainings for them? How can you do your trade shows that you were used to do in the pre-pandemic world, now do it virtually? So a lot of upskilling was required for our workforce. And the second part that we realized very quickly was we had to reskill them in soft skills. And while generally we use them soft skills, I like to call them as life skills, because these are skills in communication, collaboration, problem solving, creativity, and decision making. So we had to upskill our workforce. And for such kind of jobs, I would cite by what Professor Talwar said, which is work experience will be relevant for such jobs, but it will have to be a blend of work experience and these life skills or soft skills like we call them. So today, if I was to hire a sales professional or a sales head for an organization, I would still look for an engineering degree. I will still look for X number of years of experience, but I would also look at a blend of these soft skills. So the work experience will continue to play a role for majority of our jobs. And finally is my opening statement, which said work experience in its current form will change. What do I mean by that? Is work experience, what we understand as of today will change, which means how do we understand work experience is essentially the number of years of experience you've gained in a corporate environment. And for me, today, those shackles are breaking. We do not consider work experience which is gained only in a corporate professional organization, but it could be in various forms of your life as well. So for example, if I had a developer, I wanted to hire a developer today, I necessarily don't need to hire someone with those credentials and working in a corporate environment, but it could be someone who is part of a technology community group online, who has done various freelance gigs, has built multiple things for startups, but not in a corporate environment. Would I consider that as work experience? Absolutely, yes. So the diversification of work experience is going to become a new norm. So I conclude by saying this. Work experience in its true form that we understand today will become irrelevant, but we need to understand that work experience is no longer restricted to only industry experience. It will be transferred into life experiences as well. And to say what we here in the panel, we have esteemed panel members from the education industry. What is it that we need to do to thrive in this new normal is this. As education institutes, while the emphasis on professional education will remain, and so it should be, rightly so, there has to be more emphasis on experiential learning, on developing these soft skills. And internships with industries need to be more meaningful. It should not be only focused on developing technical competence, but also these soft skills. And because I represent an organization and I'm extremely passionate about development of soft skills, I would say as employers, what do we need to do? We need to ensure that we are accelerating the nature of skill-based hiring and development. We can no longer hire people only based on work experience alone or only on educational credentials. It has to be a blend of both. Second, what Professor Talwar was saying, a culture of learning has to be a constant, which means it's not only listing out a plethora of training programs, but also do I have a platform in my organization where I can reskill and upskill myself? If as an HR business, what partner, I'm interested to learn about coding or project management. Does my organization allow me to train myself in these cross skills? The organization benefits immensely because you have now a diverse workforce, but your employees benefit as well because I'm future-proofing myself for the new disruption that's about to happen. And for individuals who are listening, I would say, really, world is your experiment ground. Today, nothing restricts you from gaining these skills. Please pay emphasis. I'm not saying please stop your education degree right away. Please complete your education. Please gain the industry work experience. But do remember that developing these soft skills in your arsenal is what is going to make you thrive in the new normal. So I would like to conclude by saying that next time when we meet, we would not be talking only about work experience, but a blend of both work experience and life experience.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Shagun Agarwal. You have blended the talks of Professor Agarwal and Professor Talwar. But nepotism is we can very well see that you have sided. You clearly mentioned that you are going to side for Professor Agarwal. But what she says makes sense. She says in current form, work experience is relevant, but change in nature of your experience, if you will go for something new which is happening, the blending of your experience with the technology is the new norm. And she quoted about the McKinsey's report, which is pre-COVID time, 3 years back. She says at that time they mentioned that non-conventional jobs, conventional jobs, will go, and non-conventional jobs will come. They will be the future. And when they will come, definitely those work experience which are there for last so many years will not be able to sustain in that types of industry. She says she's working in a B2B company, and it was a very, very difficult task for them to push the sales, meet those targets pre-COVID time, because there cannot be having eye to eye or the personal meetings. But we have to skill and retrain our salesperson how to convince the customer or the industry only because of online. So all these things, she says that you require even soft skills. And with the soft skills, she says, I will term it as she says that she terms it as a life skills. So all these things, a blending of experience with soft skills, work experience in current form has to be changed according to her, and the diversification in work experience, which is very much required, and experiential learning is required. Yes, I remember we did a program recently, I think this week only, on the experiential learning, and we found that that is the new norm. And it is happening in abroad in all countries, where even from the childhood, they are giving the experiential learning, which is lacking still in India. But I'm sure that with the new education policy, national education policy, that will also be taking place. Thank you very much, Ms. Shagun Agarwal, for giving your views. That's why I always tell Professor Agarwal we should have some young people in our panel so that they can give the real views. Our experience are all old if we have. Anyway, thank you very much. Now my question goes to Professor Mohan Agarwal. Professor Dr. Mohan Agarwal, if you think we are talking about the work experience, then our leadership should change. Why we have a 70-year-old prime minister or the chief ministers of 77 years or 78 years old? Because if we are looking for the leaders, then only we can change ourselves. Why not we have a young leader? Why I'm saying, in 1952, the first parliament were having 26% of member of parliament of below 40 years of age. And this current parliament of 2019, only 12% member of parliaments below age of 40 years. So what you are saying is not the reality. The reality is people want a white beard prime minister, experienced prime minister. They are not looking for a young, silky prime minister. What you say about this, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal?
Thank you very much for turning it into a very nice match where there are 3 players actually from Agrawal community, including you also. But if I have to take an analogy, this analogy is of a cricket match. Probably I tried to blast my way in order to build some kind of score We have middle level scorers like Mr. Bhatt, Dr. Vishal and Mr. Anil. They built on such a brilliant innings. And then thereafter, Shagun came almost like, finisher, the best finisher, as we know, in cricket matches, where she finished the job for us. And I think what she was saying is exactly what I thought I was also saying, but probably I wasn't as clear as she is in terms of saying that the experience or the work experience that we know is that. The experience that we want is a very, very evolving thing, is a very, very dynamic thing, is a very, very diverse thing, and therefore we should be looking into that. Now, if we look into two aspects of work experience, it will answer your question quickly. Number one, the meaning of work experience is that we have been there, we have done that, and these are my learnings from it. The most problematic thing after that is people do not know how to transfer those insights from the previous one to the new situation. And where they do not either draw the insights or transfer them to the new situation, then that work experience, according to me, is dead, according to me, is totally irrelevant, and therefore it will become almost the same thing that 1 year being done 40 years or 45 years. The second point that you mentioned is of political situation where leaders are there. If you see, there was no person with any political experience who made India different, and that one was our Manmohan Singh. Well, that was also, if you remember, Rajiv Gandhi also changed India, transformed India from the India that we knew to the tech India or computer India that he brought in. So therefore, if you see the changes in this country, the changes in this country were brought by the leadership which did not have, within quotes, prior experience. Whether it is Mrs. Gandhi, whether it is Rajiv Gandhi, I'm talking Mrs. Gandhi of 1968 after Kamraj and all that, not the Mrs. Gandhi of the 70s where she was a very different Mrs. Gandhi. So Mrs. Gandhi in the beginning, after, before Morarji Desai, then it was Rajiv Gandhi, and then it was Manmohan Singh, and now it is our Modi. All four of them have one quality, and that quality is how to create creative disruption. Creative disruption. And I believe in the heart of my heart that creative disruption is brought in by fresh thinkers, by people who are younger in age, who would like to take some risk rather than hide behind the experience of so many years that they had. That was the thing I was saying. Okay. And I think I'm glad that Shagun clarified it so effectively, the point which I was making. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Agrawal. We will have a political discussion one day when we will ask you all this thing again, what we have mentioned. So not today. Now my question goes to Professor Dr. Talwar. Professor Dr. Talwar, nowadays the corporates are very clear that they do not want to train. They do not want even to brief the recruiter. They want the person who is joining their, the aspirant is joining their organization. They should be worth from day one. So where is the question of work experience? What you are saying about the work experience here, all big corporates, and they says very clearly that today we want a ready-made person. From day one, we will not even brief and we say, go and do this job. So they have to do the job. What you say about this, Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar, please.
So I think it's about the culture of an institution or an organization as well. You have a lot of very established organization, out there. Quite a few well-known, Indian behemoths, or they have a culture of training. They have a culture of getting young people, and of course, the advantage there is you mold them aligned with the vision and the overall strategic focus and culture of the organization. But obviously, these large organizations and few and far between. By and large, India is a land, most places, whether it's India or otherwise, the higher proportion of small and medium enterprises exist. And of course, for them, training is viewed as a cost, not necessarily as an investment. And if it is viewed as a cost, automatically you would like to optimize, you would like to be more cost efficient, control your costs. And thus you have larger expectations from wherever the young graduates are coming from. So I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but at the same time, I think there is, surely an advantage. Our educational system also needs to be able to imbibe a lot of that responsibility, right? For a long, period of time, the focus has largely been on, how well you've done in your exams, and the next day, a student, if you ask him exactly what came in the exam, he or she may not even remember. So automatically, it's about time. And you talked about new education policy, and it's about time that a lot of that responsibility of having graduates who are not only out there to kind of make a living, but to live a life, essentially that kind of combination, partly the responsibility has to be shouldered by education institutions. In fact, I would go as far as suggesting that even schools should be shouldering that responsibility. They have to come out of this mindset of evaluating kids predominantly on this whole idea of examination. Make them reflective thinkers, make them be able to apply a lot of these things. So automatically, if the whole system changes, the whole supply chain or the value chain changes, a lot of these things of being viewed as cost or having to train people too much, or this whole concept of, hey, forget about what you've learned in the education institution, all that kind of conversation will go away. So in my opinion, it's not a bad thing wherein, there is more expectation of higher education institutions, of primary, secondary education institutions. I think it helps us build up intrinsically and strengthen ourselves.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Vishal Talwar, for giving your views. Now, carrying his views, I would like to ask a question to Mr. Anil Kapadia. Mr. Kapadia, all the top universities in the world, whether Harvard or MIT, any university's name, they prefer to give for the post-graduation, they prefer somebody who's having some work experience after the graduation. Now, when this is the situation, and one side says that there is no work experience is required. After all, those universities, nobody feel that everybody wants money for the admissions. And nowadays, everybody knows that even in the COVID time, when a normal person can't go to USA, but for students, especially the US government and universities have allowed them to come. And Indian government, in India, we have a time gap of 84 days for the next dose of jab or the vaccination. But for those students who have got the admission in the university, you have to just show and you will get after 28 days. So when this is the situation, why they are asking for the work experience before that? What do you say about this, Mr. Kapadia?
Again, let me take the example of my son. So when I asked him the same question, Abhishek, do you really need to have 2 years of work before you take up, or 3 years of work before you take up a post-graduation diploma? So or post-graduation. So his answer was very simple. What am I going to do differently after graduation? I'm going to go to the next detailed level or niching of my education. So if I've done a little broad brush in my graduation, I'll niche myself in post-graduation. When I'm niching myself, I'm again going to be purely academic without understanding what this academics mean. Having a work experience helps me connect with the requirement of the market, of society, of community, with what I'm going to study going forward. When he is having the background of actually worked in an environment and then connect it to the study which he's going to do, he's able to absorb the study better. Relevance of the study will be better. And like Mr. Vishal has very correctly identified, if you ask the student after he finishes his exam next day morning, what do you know? He knows nothing. Now here, having worked for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, and then taking up his post-graduation, if you ask him, what have you learned? He will be able to immediately respond to you in greater detail, because he will draw on his 3 years or 5 years of actually having worked, connected with what he has actually studied, and be able to, explain it. He will be able to have, the narrative will be, the story will be like, Shagun has very beautifully put it. He's able to communicate exactly what he is able to learn or get from this area.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Becomes very relevant.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kapadia, for giving your views. Now, my last question goes to Ms. Shagun Agrawal. Mindset is to be changed. Do you agree? Because if you have to go to a doctor and you have choice of one doctor with
Sir, you are
experience
not
of.
audible, at
Oh,
least to me. You're
sorry.
not audible to me, at least to me.
Am I audible?
Not
Yes,
yet,
I
sir.
can hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah, now it is better. Now it is better.
Now you can. Okay. Ms.
Okay.
Shagun, my question to you is, do you think the mindset has to be changed? Because today, if you have to go to a doctor, a hospital, and there is two doctors, one is a fresh doctor without any experience, the other one is with experience. Number one. Number two, if your company wants to appoint an HR head, will they ask for a fresher or they will ask for an experienced HR head? Ms. Shagun, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel, for that very relevant question that you have put forward. Like I mentioned, even during my sharing session, work experience itself will not become redundant. You will need work experience in jobs which require technical competence. That cannot go away. So if I was to hire an HR head, I will require some amount of educational credential and work experience. But what I cannot rely completely on is on 100% work experience and not any soft skill to blend with it. And why is that so? Today, any of the jobs that we're doing, we have to meet customers. And to meet my end customer, I cannot do it alone on my technical competence. It has to be on my soft skill ability of communication, creativity, problem solving, so on and so forth. So you are absolutely right to say that, yes, there has to be a mind shift transition. And this will only be gradual. Artificial intelligence, digital transformation is gearing up for that change. It will happen. But work experience will still play a role. Education will still play a role, but it has to be a blended approach of both these skills with experience.
Okay, thank you very much. So today, viewers, you have seen the views of all the experts, and they are very, very clear that work experience, the traditional or the conventional types of work experience is now redundant, or it's not required. You have to have a work experience with a blending with the new technologies, as all our experts have mentioned, that you have to go for if you have experience, you require the new technology. You have to be innovative to see what is happening today. Then only your work experience is of worth. Otherwise, if you are working for last 30-40 years and if you are not aware about what is happening today in the current situation, your work experience will not work. But one thing is very clear: work experience along with the soft skill are the new norm of the day. If you have to be successful in any of your career, you require work experience as well as the new skills. Thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon se Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, as well as it was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor in our evening session to bring in front of you someone who has achieved in his or her lifetime so that they become a role model. And today we have my chief guest for Kal Aaj Aur Kal Lal Goel ke Sang at 4:30 p.m. Mr. Dipen R. Shah, pharmacist, microbiologist, MT, CTBS, AATB, surgical tissue bank recovery specialist, MTF biologics. He is joining from New Jersey, USA at 4:30 p.m. today, and he will be explaining about the tissue transplants, the organ transplants which are taking place in USA as a specialist tissue bank recovery, surgical tissue bank recovery specialist. So, and how he has started his journey and how he has reached, he will narrate everything. It's a half-an-hour program, so please tune in today for Kal Aaj Aur Kal Lal Goel ke Sang at 4:30 p.m. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Talwar. Thank you very much, Mr. Anil C. Kapadia. And thank you very much, Ms. Shagun Agrawal, for joining and giving very, very enlightening views. I'm sure our viewers are totally very much enlightened with today's media conference. Thank you very much. Thank you, all the viewers.